Thanks, Mona. All right, happy afternoon, everybody. Well, happy lunch hour, really. Hopefully you're eating something delicious and we're happy to have you join us during this time. We're gonna learn about college access to college completion from our Iowa Trio folks. So really excited to have them join us for our On Track event going on this week. I'm looking forward to this because it's talking about access all the way to completion, which I think when we're talking to our seniors, the first thing we're thinking about is access, and grades lower than that too. So definitely excited to hear about, the whole process all the way through. Just some quick housekeeping items. We are in a Zoom webinar today, so you'll probably notice that you're not able to mute and unmute like a Zoom meeting. But if you do have a question you'd like to ask live, we can definitely, we have an option to allow you to unmute. So just feel free to put it in the chat if you'd like to do that. But you can put questions in the chat as well. And we will ask those as we move along through the presentation today. So we'll definitely get to your questions answered. So just feel free to pop them in there, or let me know if you'd like to be unmuted so you can chat to the panel today. Let's see. And everything's being recorded this week. So we will have the link to the recording will be emailed to those that register. And then beyond today, if you're looking for the recording link, you can connect with your high school counselor. They will have all of the recording links starting Monday next week. Oh, excuse me. So you can definitely ask them if you're looking for a specific recording. And then lastly, I'll just pop our event link in the chat here. And if you're looking for other college going related topics to attend throughout this week, feel free to click there to see what other options are available for the rest of the days this week, and you can register there as well. And then if you're looking to create your FSA ID, we do have some sessions in the morning, so you can join us to create that. We'll go through on how to do that, and then you can leave with your FSA ID created. Okay, I think that's all of my points to hit on before we get started. So Sybil, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sybil McIntyre, and I am so pleased to be here with you all today. Thank you, Jamie, for inviting us. It's not just myself, but we have several TRIO professionals from across the state of Iowa. We'll get into introductions in just a minute, but just wanted to welcome everyone and thank you for making time for this conversation. We call it TRIO Talks. We are discussing college access to college completion today with you all. And so we are very excited to be able to get connected. One of the things that we like to do when we do our introductions is not just say our name. Obviously, I'm Sybil McIntyre. You can see there by my Zoom title, but I work in a college TRIO program. I work at Southeastern Community College, and my TRIO program is called Student Support Services. And so my role at the community college is to help students successfully complete their associate's degree and then transfer on to that four-year university or college. And we serve students at Southeastern in both the West Burlington and Burlington and Keokuk campus. And I have been in the TRIO world for 8 years, and I'm going to actually hand it over next to my colleague, Molly.
Awesome. Thanks, Sybil. So one other thing that is super cool, she is the president-elect for Iowa TRIO Association. Shout out to her. She gets to start her year as president of our association in November. So my name is Molly Kingma, and I am the current president of the Iowa TRIO Association, which is super fun. I'm going to work with all these great people all over the state. And my role is a TRIO talent search advisor. So I work with the middle school and the high school students around Des Moines. So I work in the Des Moines Public Schools. And so my goal is to help them get through the college process. We do a lot of what Jamie is hoping we talk about today and what we have designated for you today. So I'm really excited to have another audience to tell more about what we talk about all the time.
I'm going to throw it to Brittany next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Beard, and I work at Scott Community College in Bettendorf, Iowa. And I work in our Student Support Services TRIO program, which is the same thing as Sybil. So we serve students who are earning their associate's degree, helping them to achieve that, and then hopefully transfer to a four-year university. I've been in TRIO for 5 years, but I was also in a TRIO program, 2 TRIO programs as a college student at Iowa State, go Cyclones. And let's see, I think that's it. So I'm gonna pass it to Katie.
Awesome, thank you very much. So my name is Katie Evenson. Despite what you see behind me, I actually work at Simpson College, just south of Des Moines in Indianola. I work as the Upward Bound advisor for our program at Simpson. University of Iowa is just my alma mater, and so I'm proud of that. But like Molly, I work with students before they get to college. I specifically work with high school students, so 9th through 12th graders, on some of those same things of getting them ready for college, academic success, scholarships, all of those pieces. And Kristen, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Tristan Schmidt. I work at the University of Iowa, and I work with our TRIO Upward Bound program here. So a lot of pre-college students, mostly high schoolers, 9th and 12th grade. Specifically in my work, I work with our 9th and 10th graders. And so I kind of do more or less the fundamental kind of skill building, working on those different value inventories. What is important to them? What is the purpose? What's the meaning of things? How do we help them achieve their own goals and missions? And I love it. I've been doing it since March of 2021, but I've been involved with TRIO a little bit here and there through college. I was one of those high school and college students that was like, could have been, but didn't do it because either I didn't know about it or I didn't have the eligible program, which is why we're here today, so we can talk about these things. So I will turn it back over to Sybil.
All right, thank you. And so the other thing we just really wanted to make sure that you all in this conversation today get to know a little bit more about what we do, so in hopes that we can really connect with you in the future. As you heard, these presenters are from all over the state, but we do have that commonality. TRIO programs are federally funded, so our funding comes from the Department of Education, and we're here to provide services that possibly the college, the university, the high school, or that community organization couldn't provide because they don't have the budget or the resources to do that. And because we're a federally funded grant, we are able to provide these services to our participants if they meet eligibility requirements at no cost to them, which is wonderful, especially if you're a first-generation college student, a student who may be under-resourced, also considered possibly a Pell eligible or a low-income student. And also we work with students in our TRIO programs that have documented disabilities. So some of the things that we are providing to our students, certainly as you heard, are college access, but also college success programming. And then when they are in our program, we provide that sense of community. They oftentimes are the very first in their families to engage in these types of conversations and activities of thinking about going off to college. And so they are with others who are very similar to them. And the other thing that we also provide to our participants is an opportunity to ensure that they have cultural engagement activities and also have that understanding of the FAFSA and financial literacy, which often is a huge barrier for students to enter and to complete their college education. And you guys may have heard of some of these programs before, but there's actually 8 TRIO programs. You heard Molly from Talent Search. We have Katie and Tristan from Upward Bound, but we also have Upward Bound focused in on math and science. Student Support Services, my program and Brittany's program at the 2-year college, the community college, but we also have Student Support Services at the 4-year universities across the state. Our Ronald McNair program housed at Iowa State is focused in on helping students go on to graduate school and PhD programs. And our educational opportunity centers are really engaging with our community folks that don't know how to do an application or a FAFSA, and they're getting them into that college setting. The last program that we want to speak about before I get into the training program is the Veterans Upward Bound. And that's focused on our service personnel after they've served in our military and they come back and maybe they need to complete a HiSET, or they need to complete some community college or technical or four-year university work. That's what that Veterans Upward Bound program does. And last but not least, our federal TRIO training programs. So there are 8 opportunities for participants to be in our programs. And as Brittany mentioned, she was a participant in not 1, but 2 programs. And so that's another really important piece too to think about, that if you are maybe working with somebody like Molly in talent search and that student happens to come to my college, hopefully we can get connected with them and continue those services. Now I'm going to do a quick pause. It looks like there isn't anything right now in the chat. Is that correct, Jamie? I'm not seeing anything in there. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to ask these colleagues of mine if they would share with you all a little bit more about the question, how can a parent or guardian or that support person, how can they help this college going individual? And so Molly, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. And we're going to have a conversation here about how that parent or guardian can help that student.
Absolutely. So a couple of different things. What we do with our seniors is we give them a checklist, and they have to go through and talk with their parent or guardian about all sorts of different situations. So how is college actually getting paid for? Is the parent going to be able to take out a Parent Plus loan or a private loan or not help at all? Do they know how to fill out the FAFSA? Do they know how or where they're going to be living? So I've had a couple of students do this and find out different answers than what they had assumed. So a few students were like, yeah, I'm totally going to live on campus. I'm going to commute, or I'm going to be able to just live on campus at the college that's like 45 minutes away from their house, and they're fine with that. And then their parents don't agree with that. So I've had a couple of students with that. They've had to have some hard conversations with their parents on what it's going to look like, that they'll be living at home and commuting, but they won't be able to be the babysitter. They won't be able to be there as much as the parent thinks they will be. And those are some really hard conversations that my students have had to have. That was one recently. And so thankfully her parents were understanding. And so the student was able to move to a different part of the house and have a more secluded, kind of a more private area that's a little bit more of their own. So that I'm interested to see how it goes, and I hope it goes well for them. But that was a really tough conversation that that student had to have with them. And so I'm really thankful, as part of my job, I get to keep checking in with them. And I remember when I was going to college, my parents and I had to have tough conversations often of even just deciding where I was going to go. And so just helping students figure out how to pay for college and what that's going to look like. So yes, highly recommend finding a checklist. I think we have it on the resources page potentially, but just having those hard conversations that you didn't necessarily know you needed to talk about.
Thank you, Molly. I'm gonna ask Katie, would you go next and kind of share a little bit about your experience as the Upward Bound advisor?
Yeah, just to echo what Molly is saying about some of these hard conversations, I think it's also timely too. You know, having the hard conversation about how a student will pay for college, if it's done at the beginning of their senior year, can really set them up to, you know, if a student knows that they're going to be solely responsible for finding the resources to pay for their education, if they know that at the beginning of the year, then it's more manageable as far as, knowing that, okay, then I need to go for all of these scholarships, or I need to make sure that I do my FAFSA, as soon as I'm able to, once it opens on October 1st. And so I've seen, and I think that my colleagues can agree with this too, that we've seen both situations, where the conversation, the hard conversation about how college is going to be paid for, happens at the beginning of the year, and then that student owns that and takes it on, and is able to then really plan for it. And then we've also had the opposite of that, where we've seen students who are into April and May and June, and are working to figure out how this is going to look in August, when they get their first bill, or July when they get their first bill for their college. And so I can think of a couple of situations where I've had students who have been really scrambling. Even just this year, I was working with a student in August, and she was moving in a couple of weeks to her new college, and was just, we were exhausting all kinds of resources. And that's part of our role too, is to be that support for the student in whichever way makes sense. And so she and I were having conversations with financial aid and with admissions. Is there any more scholarship money that's available from the institution? Really checking off all of those different boxes. And things did work out, and she is where she's at right now, and it's great, and I'm happy for her, because I think she's thriving there. But to have those conversations earlier in the year, maybe would have saved some of that stress towards the end. And so those conversations are also very timely, and I've seen it go both ways, and I like it when students know what to prepare for.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to send it to Brittany next.
All right. So in my current role, I work with current college students. So I don't deal a lot with parent or guardians, but I forgot to mention in my introduction that I also worked as the Gear Up Iowa coordinator. And in that role, I worked with incoming students straight out of high school. And some of those students were first generation. Actually, a lot of those students were first generation college students. And their parents, some of my students, their parents were not familiar with what college was like and expectations. So one thing that I would encourage parents and the youth to do as well is to just have a conversation in general about what college is like. And I understand that a lot of our students who are first generation, they're not going to know that right away. So it's really important for our students and parents to continue these critical conversations throughout their time in college. And it can be difficult. I've had students who don't really have a relationship with their parents, or it's not a really close relationship. And I would say through my experiences working with these students that that's a good time to maybe start having those conversations. And if it's a parent, if not a parent, then a guardian as well. Additionally to that, I would say that I've had students in their first semester that said they wanted to become a doctor. And through multiple conversations, we found out that that is actually what their parents wanted them to be. I don't know how many times I've had these conversations with students. So I think it's really important for parents to sit down with their children and the youth as well, to have those conversations. This is really what I want to do. These are my skills. These are my interests, or I'm considering this. And for parents to ask, what are you considering? What other things are you interested in? So to have those conversations early on. I had a student who her parents wanted her to be a doctor, but she was really interested in computers and doing computer engineering or somewhere along those lines. And so that was a tough conversation that I had to have with her. And again, that's part of our role. We are working with these youth and helping them to develop in those areas. So, and that's something we are more than willing to continue to have conversations with. However, we do encourage them to advocate for themselves as well and speak with their parents regarding that. And I think Molly and Katie hit on the other two areas I was going to talk about. So.
All right, Tristan, to you, if you would share final thoughts here that you have as an Upward Bound advisor for our pre-college folks.
Yeah. So there's a good question in the chat that I was actually going to touch on, and I'll get to it. Particularly the first thing I do want to mention is I have a lot of siblings that come from our program. And so I've had a brother and a sister, and I have a younger sister, and potentially in 2 years, I'll have another younger sister from the same family. It's fun. I like it. But you also do see, things within family that you wouldn't, I would say normally see if you had like just one kid up from that family. A lot of the students from that family end up going into medical professions or STEM professions. And there's this very big expectation then for everyone else to keep going and going into these fields. I had a student one who was like, I really don't want to go into that, but my parents have this pressure and this expectation of me to go into this. And it's always trying to make sure, working with my students, I always try to make sure that, ask them what are the expectations your parents have of you currently? And how do you think about this? How do those make you feel? And then, writing those down, thinking of those things, and then having a sit down conversation with the parents or guardians or whoever that person may be in their life or persons, and just sharing like, these are the expectations I've seen from you. And I want to talk about these because, they may not be as good for me. They may not work for me. Let me tell you what I need, what works for me. And that, that's not always a possibility. There are always some differences and things like that will always occur, but just being able to communicate that, particularly, not changing parental expectations, but reframing them in the way that students' growth and any, let's say, I've interpreted it as resistance or like not wanting to go into something, but seeing that if they don't want to go into a field or something, maybe that's a way to reframe it as like, oh, they don't want to go into this field because they don't like it. My student is telling me, hey, they want to go into this field instead because they actually have more joy out of it. Being able to reframe it more of a strengths-based approach is going to do a lot of good in building up that enthusiasm and confidence. Secondly, I would say also don't be surprised if your student, as they get older, as they progress through their years in college, that they start to advocate for themselves a little bit more, that they, say things that quote unquote, they talk back or things like that. And I know that was a big problem in my household with me and my dad, especially particularly when it came to choosing majors and stuff. But it was the way we had to sit down and do it because we didn't know how to communicate properly. And we just had to sit down and do it. And it took time, but we did it. And so being able to understand that when it feels like resistance or something being pushed back, I encourage folks to reframe it and think about it from the perspective of the student. What is the student actually telling me they need from me? Or are they letting me know something? And then again, that question of communication of like, how do you communicate? That's entirely dependent up to you and your student and how you and your student's relationships function. I could provide a plethora of tools, but it would honestly require me to understand the context of your relationship. So take it from there. Think of a favorite outing or like a favorite spot you'd like to go get a treat at or something. Let's say go get froyo. Take your student to go get froyo. Just a little quick afternoon outing and like have a conversation, talk to them, get to know them. And yeah, it will feel awkward and weird at first, but that's what it's like getting to know your student as not just your kid or your student anymore, but as a person as they start to actualize. And so it will be awkward at first, but once you start to get to know your own student as a person, they are so great. It's like a wonderful painted canvas.
Awesome. So I think we answered Jamie's question. Thank you, Tristan, for doing that. So appreciate that. And so what we're going to do next is just flip it to another topic. that we wanted to share with you all. And it's really all about what we hear from those students that we work with, those graduates, those TRIO participants who have come to us and they successfully entered into college, completed whatever goal they had, and want to share with us things like, I wish I would have known this. I can't even tell you the number of times as an advisor in my role that, you know, people say, gosh, you know what, if I only would have known this. And, you know, for practitioners, I feel that it's really important for us to always ask those questions of our students and seek that feedback, because as you all know, higher education is constantly changing, especially over the last couple of years as we navigate higher ed in the COVID timeframe. So we're going to talk about things we hear from our TRIO graduates. And Tristan, since we finished with you, could we start with you this go around?
Yes, I'd love to. I particularly want to talk about two things. So first of all, building community is challenging but worth it. Now, that is said because, you know, it is hard making friends as adults, especially as you're trying to blossom from a high school student to a college student who is then going to be slowly shifting into that adult way of life. And so it can be hard to make friends sometimes, and it can feel a little awkward and a little forced at times, but that's all a part of the process, and it's okay. That's, you know, this is where it takes time to build yourself up and understand what you enjoy. When you find out more about yourself, and like, let's say, you know, you're a student, you come to campus, think of the hobbies you had already. You know, if you're really into music, you know, check out the symphony orchestra on campus. If there's an open orchestra for the public or the community, you know, or if you're really interested in, let's say you're really interested in a foreign language, let's say Italian, but you don't want to study Italian, but you love that culture, that interest and things like that. Check out the Italian Club. That's where all those different resources come in, as well as not even just student org, but like at the University of Iowa, we have a space called the Center for Inclusive Academic Excellence, which includes all of our TRIO programs and our on-campus services and coaching, where in this space, you can just come in, hang out, take a nap on one of the couches, do homework, print stuff for free, and just kind of hang out and chill and build community with other folks. Sometimes there's food, sometimes there's free coffee, you know, who knows? But I mean, it's those little things that help along the way. And then finally, this was particularly something that happened with me a lot. But picking an area that a study that excites you and is okay if you do not find it right away. Now, this one was fun for me because I was an open major for the longest time. Also because I switched my major 10 times officially, 15 times unofficially, because I love school and love everything, but I could not decide for my life to what I wanted to study. And so just that it's okay if you don't find it right away. There is reasons why you have your general education courses built in, why you have space for electives and things like that. And, you know, if you find it at the last minute, hey, you found it. I found my major at the last minute and I fell in love with it. So just think about that. And, you know, it's not always the end. You could always, a cough grad school, professional school, things like that. So, you know, the adventure never ends.
Thank you, Tristan. Katie, would you share with us things that you hear from graduates?
Yes. So on the slide here, there's a couple of different things that really stand out to me, particularly as they are very recent. The first one is the imposter syndrome. I have had discussions lately about students going into their college education and just feeling like, where do I belong here? Like, do I belong here? I feel like everybody is ahead of me, or I feel like, you know, for whatever reason, maybe it's because they're in a place that is, you know, people may have more money or more resources than them, or they may be moving to a predominantly white space. And so that might be something that is a different than what their experience was like in high school. And so for those things, you know, I hear that from students, and I hear that is hard. It makes it hard to be in those spaces. And so I think knowing that that could be something that is coming up for students, especially first generation students, especially low income students, that it is something that if they can potentially prepare for mentally, knowing that this may be something that comes up, that can be something that hopefully, if and when those feelings of being an imposter come up, that they can understand that, one, that it's normal, and that's something that a lot of students are working through and navigating, but to just to understand to that they're not, that they belong in that space, that is a place they belong. So that's something that I've seen recently. We had the opportunity to visit a campus recently, and I actually have 2 students who had just started like 2 weeks before, and so I'm hearing these things. I'm hearing this right away, and I know that those first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they were not easy weeks. I had a student who was like, I went home one weekend and I wondered if I should go back, and was really feeling that. And so that's been on my mind as far as with students and how they're doing. The other one, just to go off of what Tristan was saying too, what I see from our students who are not quite in college yet, I hear all the time of feeling such immense pressure to decide what they're going to do as a major and as a career. And I think like all of my colleagues on here can attest to this and see this with their students, like feeling just all of this pressure to have that figured out and to be on that path. And I can understand why that is. I understand, where that pressure is coming from, because college is expensive. And so they don't want to waste time, or what they feel like is going to waste time. And so for, going into college, I think as unsatisfying as an answer it is, I think taking advantage of those things that Tristan, that you mentioned, of being open to a lot of different types of general education classes, being open to different electives, really putting yourself out there as far as trying different things that maybe you would in no other circumstance either have the opportunity to do or would try. That's the time to kind of try those things out. And so as like a parent or guardian or support person, really emphasizing that you have all of these opportunities as a college student to try so many different things, and you have access to so many different resources and people and all of these different things. And so to take advantage of those.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. I'm going to turn it over to Brittany next.
All right. One of the things I hear from students very often is that they do not know or don't remember, I should say, that they have to complete the FAFSA every year. Every year they have to complete it. And so it opens October 1st every year. Every year they have to renew it. The good news is once they've done it once, they just have to renew it. So it usually takes less time every time they do it. So that is definitely a huge thing we all hear quite a bit. And another thing that I hear, so working in student support services, we serve so many different students. I've worked with students who are from all across the world, who have been in foster care, who are single moms, single dads, who are homeless, who, I mean, you name it, we've all experienced that. And one of the things that I constantly hear, and I'm sure this is nationwide in TRIO programs, is once they graduate, they come back and they tell us how beneficial TRIO was, how TRIO helped them be successful. And I can personally attest to it being in TRIO programs as well. But our students, they have told me that. I just had a student that graduated and transferred to a private university and has said, and this university doesn't unfortunately have a TRIO program. And he has told me the struggles he's had transitioning, which he already knew he'd have a bit of a struggle anyway, because they don't have a TRIO program. Luckily, we're like 10 minutes away. So I told him, you can still come back and see us and have that sense of community, but they do need that at the university they're at as well. But I hear time after time about how students really appreciate the TRIO programs. They get the support, we have the resources, we listen to them, we're here for them, we help them and encourage them to speak with their parents and have those conversations. So there really is so much value in TRIO programs. So I would definitely, as a parent, walk alongside your student, and as they are investigating and looking into different schools that they're interested in, check to see if there's a TRIO program. And then we're gonna talk about that a little later in the presentation, but we're all over the globe. So it'll be really great and very beneficial to the students if they are at a school that has that. So a lot of students have had really, really great experiences being in TRIO.
Thank you, Brittany. Molly?
Absolutely. Thanks. These are all fantastic. It's so real and it's so crazy of like, we're all serving different students and we're all hearing the same things all the time. One of the things that stood out to me when we were talking about renewing your FAFSA is I think I've gotten the most messages from graduates that are about 2 or 3 years out of high school that need more scholarships. So their first year scholarships have expired. So that's the other thing, is to have your students continually look for new scholarships. Going into the financial aid office and asking if they have any new scholarships that they can apply for. Constantly doing searches on how their situation may have changed. I just had a student, I knew part of the story, but this student's dad passed away from asbestos related incidents. So we did a quick search and there's scholarships that could potentially pay for college just related to that. With this, it's like asbestos.com is basically where the scholarship would come from. So just constantly searching for different scholarships is probably the hugest thing that I get messages for. That and what to do post-college. So how to get a reference. I think that's the other biggest thing I hear is they don't know that professors or their work study or their jobs can be references for them. Even though they're still in their like very entrance level positions, they're still going to need references when they graduate from college and trying to get a 40-hour work week job. So there's a lot of great resources on all of the campuses that are helping them create resumes and create all of the materials that they need for a job application, but they still need their network. So I think that goes back to building your community and finding community, is that as your students are there on campus, that they're trying to build that community because that community wants to help them and letting them help them as well. So being able to have a reference when you graduate is huge. If you have 3, even better. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest things I hear from students, is just the scholarships and kind of what to do after college, because you're trying to find the job. So yes, and I definitely agree with the majors not fully impacting your area of study. The majors, it's going to be great. It's super great. We need to study it, but it will help you develop as a person no matter what you choose to study, which is also hard to hear. I know my majors were religion and Spanish. So I get to tell my students that all the time, that I got to this position in kind of a roundabout way. I went into college thinking I was going to be a physical therapist. And that's where we're at. So it will be okay. That is one of the hard conversations my parents and I had on no longer becoming a physical therapist. So it'll be okay, promise.
All right, thank you all for sharing. I want to pause just really quickly. Questions from anybody in the chat? I don't think I see any, other than Jamie just confirmed, yes, FAFSA every year.
Let you know, I'm keeping an eye on that too.
Awesome. Alrighty, so we are just going to go right on into our next slide. Also want to share that those that you heard from today, they actually have put forth some of these recommended resources. So the first one is actually a book, Kip Van Dyke's Voice of College. Great reading to use with your students. We also love the materials library from ICANN and also the college planning terminology. If any of you have been doing this work, there's an acronym for everything, and what we call one thing in society is something else in higher ed. And so we seem to speak somewhat of a language that many don't understand. Even us as professionals, we're always continuing to learn terminology to ensure that we're helping pass it on to our participants. One of my favorites, Khan Academy, and this specifically for our pre-college folks, SAT, ACT, that prep, but also when you come into college, Khan Academy is wonderful for resources, tutoring, and just some additional resources for our college going students. And the last but not least are Iowa Student Aid Commission resources. And so here in the state of Iowa, we're very lucky to have so many high quality free resources, especially like this today. Coming to you and hoping to get the word out about resources. And oh yes, and thank you so much for chatting that in there. We can certainly get those links out as well. And we did just want to make sure too that we gave you a little bit more of an overview of TRIO programs across the Midwest. And so Molly, I'm going to turn it over to you, but we just wanted to kind of end with this little note of information.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sybil, for facilitating our panel. I am excited to talk through the different programs in the Midwest. So I think it's always relevant to see, and kind of Brittany was mentioning too, of like, if you can get your student to a TRIO program, let us help you. And then like, that's what we're here for. I love it. We love it. It's always interesting. You get to kind of live vicariously all sorts of different jobs. That's one of my favorite parts of this is, oh, okay, today's student wants to know about psychology, become a psychiatrist, and tomorrow's student wants to know how to become an athletic trainer for the NFL. All right, let's figure out how to do this. So super fun. So if you can, great. So this is the Midwest. In Iowa, you can also see where our programs are at as well. This is kind of a little bit of a rough sketch with an overlay from a Google map that we have. And you can reach out to any of us if you want to know more exactly where they are at and where they're located, because a lot of these are located at colleges and universities in Iowa, but we serve different pieces and parts. So like Katie's based out of Indianola, but she serves Des Moines and she serves some of the surrounding communities. I'm based at Central College in Pella, but I serve Des Moines. My coworker goes down to Oskaloosa. So it kind of varies with that. And then the last one is just what Brittany was saying is literally, this is all of us. Like I've talked with someone that has a TRIO program in Guam, which was crazy. So we are all over. We're in Guam, Puerto Rico. We've been around since 1956. So I think we kind of know what we're doing. I think we keep getting better too. So again, we would love it if your students would become part of it, or just reach out and ask us questions. And if they don't become official students with us, participants, we would love to help, like however we can help. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we just want to offer, like Molly said, our help to you all. This is really about getting connected with individuals across the state. And you can see our contact information here. And certainly we've got a little bit of time. We're going to leave open for questions and put that in the Q&A or in the chat for us.
I will also add, before we close out a little bit, something that it doesn't get talked about a lot, but that does happen in TRIO programs throughout the nation, is that a lot of the professional folks who are in TRIO are, doing things outside of their time, going to advocate for TRIO at Capitol buildings, in Washington, D.C., in talking with community leaders and things like that. And so also with TRIO, it's more than just a program. It's a community of advocates. It's a family of people who want to get together and make sure that everybody has that equitable access to higher education, or just, the opportunity to see what's out there for themselves. I came into TRIO wishing I had been in it for so long, and so now I'm just happy to be working in it. And so just know that regardless of whether or not you're in TRIO, or whether you think you might be in it someday or something, just know that regardless, there'll still be people advocating for students and educational equity.
Couple of questions for you. Because I'm not sure who our audience is, but I am wondering how high school counselors can connect their students to a TRIO program. And you might have touched on this, so I'm sorry if I missed it.
I would recommend that they reach out to one of us listed here, and then we can kind of help get them connected that way. Because we have kind of our network of TRIO professionals, and so we can help them get plugged into the right spot. So
Yeah. Is there any, are there general requirements for a student to participate in any of the TRIO programs, or do they all have their own?
So the general ones are that, and there's some ratios and there's some differences and not 100% applicable, but the general consensus is that they are first in their family to go to college. So if their parents graduated from like a two-year program, the student is still considered a first-generation college student.
Okay.
So a friend of mine, their dad graduated, got his associates, but he's still considered a first-generation student.
Okay.
And then the other one is that they are from an income-eligible household.
Okay.
So that could be they're receiving SNAP benefits, or we have like the ratio that we use from the government. I have mine posted all the time. So again,
Awesome.
not 100% applicable. And then there are specific ones. Some programs, the students have a disability of some sort that they aid with. Can you guys think of any other ones?
Yeah, I was about to say, generally, if most of the time, a quick way for us when we're working at Upward Bound, that we work with our school counselors to identify if a student's eligible or not from that income perspective, is also checking, do they qualify for free or reduced lunch program as well? Because I usually provide an answer, and I know that I think there's like subtle differences between all the programs. For example, Upward Bound may have a little bit of a subtle difference compared to EOC in terms of the application. But more or less, generally speaking, the guidelines pretty much are the same.
Okay. Cool, thank you. Jones. Okay, and then this is more grant specific of a question, so I'm not, this is just really out of my own curiosity. How is it decided where TRIO programs will live, like which colleges and things like that? I see you all nodding and smiling.
That's a great question. So our grants are federally funded. We are also part of a type of grant that is competitive. So every 5 years, a community organization a community college, a university, a four-year college has an opportunity to potentially write for a particular TRIO grant. The Department of Education does have a schedule of what years each kind
Okay.
of program is actually coming up for competition. And so, for example, our Upward Bound programs and our McNair programs were just refunded this year. And so it's incredibly competitive. And so we encourage as many programs as possible to write and encourage new programs, which is part of what we as Iowa TRIO members and our organization really try to help facilitate and work maybe with colleges or universities that don't have programs yet to get them connected when you know it's time to write for particular programs.
Awesome. We have the Gear Up program with us at our office, so it sounds a little bit similar, but stressful all the same. Congratulations, because that's really exciting news.
Historical fun fact, back in the day, they used to have to write them every other year and every
my
year. And I was involved in helping to write ours this year for the University of Iowa, which, yay, we were funded up until 2027. So if you're thinking about the University of Iowa, just let me know. But yeah, I mean, in the past, I remember we were in a training earlier this year for legs and regs, shorthand for legislation and regulations. But I remember the speakers there would talk about how grants and everything would have to get rewritten every year, and then slowly every other year, and then folks were like, there's not enough time. And so eventually the 5-year thing came out, and now here we are.
It's always a good blessing to have the extra time. It benefits everybody. So, in my personal opinion.
One thing I'll say too is that as like a pre-college program too, we have to show that the high schools that we're going into demonstrate need. And so that's one of the things that we look at as well when we're deciding for the next grant, you know, which high schools we will serve. And so that's something that we are looking at a bunch of statistics that are out there about schools and needs. So that's kind of how that is figured out too. And so we, in this grant, will serve only a certain set of high schools that we wrote for. And so, and then that could change or it could stay the same for the next grant.
Right.
But it really just depends on what we write for.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. It definitely helps understand this better. This is a service I wish I had known about when I went to college. So I always love hearing from you guys. I'm like, where was this? And I'm sure it was out there, but I just wasn't aware of it.
Or you could have been like me, and I remember it being in my high school and all of us making fun of it because it was called Talent Search. So
that wasn't my case, but I'm sad for that.
We're like, what are you looking for, Simon Cowell? We're like, I should have been in this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. If I had any there was one of my better friends from college. She was telling me about the TRIO program at her high school, and I'm like, what is this? How come mine didn't have this? And so just learning from her, I was like, wow, this is just amazing work and a great resource for our students. So if you are listening on behalf of your students, definitely get connected with this resource because it's incredible. Okay, I think, I did have one more question. We have a little bit of time, so if you don't mind, I'll shoot it out and anybody can answer. Are there any specific topics you might suggest for parents and or students to start conversing about their junior or senior year of high school? We did talk about financial conversations, which is definitely really important. I think my mind was thinking more about the transition. So if you're moving away, what life might look like outside of your community or your house. But if there's any things that come to mind for our junior, senior students.
I could add on to this. Particularly, I work at upward bound programs in school districts in Muscatine, West Liberty, and Columbus Junction. And so we often have a disproportionately higher population of Latinx, Latino, Latina students that work with us. And so it's more on us as the students, but just being able to be culturally competent and adapt to the students and their needs, and also just kind of meeting them where they're at as well. And that's something that can be a bit hard to do, especially because I try to think also the cultural lens of our students. Do they have to work after school to help with their family? Do they have to go babysit their siblings? Do they have to do both?
Right.
And things like that. And then what kind of, do they speak only Spanish at home? They speak English outside of the home, things like that in those contexts, and just being able to meet students where they're at. And also it is preparing students for the reality that there may be situations where they will need to self-advocate for their own identities, and what they believe is meaningful and truthful for them. So I think one of the biggest things that students and families can do together now is just having those conversations about, what does this mean to you? What does this identity mean to you, and how do you want to carry that forward with you into college and in the world? Because higher education and high school, those are quite formative years, where I remember, because if you had a certain identity, you could be ridiculed or things like that. And just being able to make sure students leave high school knowing that there's no shame in who they are or what they do.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great topic to be bringing up. Sorry, I'm also taking notes at the same time I'm chatting.
You touch on this too, but I think one of the things that they can talk about is maybe what, like how far away, or what kind of expectations there are of the student, maybe to stay close. I know that we've touched on that, quite a bit, but I think that's something that we see, just students having different responsibilities within their families or their communities or whatever, and are those going to continue? And just making sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what the expectations are, and also what the student needs as far as being able to do that. Molly, I think it was you who mentioned like having a different space if they're living at home, and those kind of things, so that both can happen if the expectation is that they continue certain responsibilities that they currently have. And so making sure that everybody, if a student is thinking that they will want to be out of state, but the parent or guardian or support system isn't thinking that way, then that can be a really tough thing, and that impacts a lot. As far as when you're in your junior year, hopefully you're starting to make those decisions about what's important to you and what you're looking for in a college, and so you can move forward pretty quickly into your senior year as far as applications and all of that goes. So having that those expectations set and those conversations had can really make a difference.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. That's I think a lot of students are, especially first gen, very just unexpecting of what life will look like when they get to where they want to be, and then how that affects the family too, because those ties are usually pretty strong, and it's a big deal for a family that's used to having all their folks together. So appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna skim through the chat real quick, but thank you for adding all the links. I've also copied them out to provide like as a supplement with our recording. So I'll be sure that those make it out to everybody as well. Doesn't look like there's any questions though, and I'll check the Q&A here real quick. Nope, it looks like we're all good. All right. Well, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here. I'm always interested in these topics, so I hope our attendees pulled out some good nuggets of information as well. Definitely appreciate you all being here. And I'm sure you'll hear from me throughout the school year just to connect on that high school counselor level too. But again, thank you. And we can go ahead and stop recording.